Today we're going to be talking about 3 web novels that were submitted for my critique, and we're going to talk about them, the story, the mistakes they made, the triumphs they made, and pick a winner. That's what we're doing today. Do they have anything to do with the Christmas motif? Nope, I'm just decorated for Christmas, and there's no Christmas web novels I've ever read. And in this series, I read the first 10 chapters of what was submitted, meticulously notate my thoughts. And in this instance, there will be a bit of a change up, as we'll see to the third. This will be less review, and we're going to get into a sort of discussion. We're going to have a discussion. And in that discussion, you might learn some tricks. We'll call them tricks. And if you're a certain kind of person, you might learn a life lesson. Our first story is Assessment Initiated by Murray E. Rook. I got it right. The Earth has been selected for assessment, and right away, if you're familiar with web novels at all, you know where this is going. This initiates a year-long trial where humanity passing is merely surviving the coming challenges. Failure means death. Systems integration renders all our advanced technology obsolete. The system opens portals of monsters while granting survivors fantastic powers. 40% of the population already failed the assessment in the first 24 hours. Morgan is a young security guard. Lots of simple sentences. It's a story about Morgan. He's a security guard, and there's a video game system. We know where this is going. This is actually a first chapter that I reviewed on my critiquing thread, and I thought it was pretty good. But a little splotchy in places. And we're gonna repeat those critiques right now, in that the opening is supposed to be clever and comedic with a security guard frozen in time as the system initiates, and the issue is that he's eating a sandwich, and all I could think of was Paul Blart Mall Cop. It just feels like there's this fat security guard, which he's not supposed to be based on the rest of the book, but just immediately, the comedic bit immediately just slobby, mayo over himself, and that image was stuck in my head for a while. It's not even that bad of a comedy bit, but I guess that sort of brings into the characterization here in the first chapter, in that we really have Morgan and we have Frank. Morgan is just kind of an underachieving security guard who's been working here a long time. He's like thinking about getting his EMT certification because his boss is pushing for it, but he's doesn't want to do that. Which, as far as sort of not even down on your luck characters, but characters who are just sort of generally not doing okay, it's a pretty good start because it's understated. A lot of the times, it's just you get these like neats just in their room, and you're like, take pity on my character who's just a loser and unlovable. And my answer to that is always no. And Frank, his boss, is pretty fun. He's a grunt, ex-military veteran, and as the world gets unfrozen, they now have to deal with this crisis. And the first crisis is just one of their fellows has broken their leg on a pallet, and they're going to try and fix that. It gets a little weird. This is the weird point of the series for me, is chapter 2. It opens like an anime. It's very like bubbly and fantastical. The presentation of this system is this dapper, like Balan looking guy who's just in the sky telling them all this expository dialogue about what they need to do, which is going to feel redundant in a second because get ready for the exposition in this novel. But that felt weird, especially with Frank, the grizzled army veteran, who just, first off, the juxtaposition of those two together, weird. And then Frank is just very accepting of the fantastical, oh, there's goblins now, oh, there's magic now, oh, I have to level up. Has Frank played a video game before? It's not a huge complaint, but it's jarring. We'll call it jarring. The entire presentation of the system is weird. It feels very like tech bro-y, like, yo, dude, check out our new VR game. Just a few word switches in there, and if there's a disconnect, which, I mean, if you look at like Mark Zuckerberg's face, there's the disconnect between him and humanity. There's the disconnect here between the expositional dialogue we're getting and just what a normal person would talk like, how you would introduce information. But then what I did like was a funny bit where they don't get their skills right away because there's too much strain on the system, like an actual video game server, which is a funny bit. It adds more to the tech bro. These people in charge have no idea what they're doing. Why is this the system? But it's funny. Chapter 3 starts. We're right in the middle of an action scene. He killed one thing, but now there's 20 more things. Action scenes need subcontext. They need a greater level going on. If you just randomly say, these people are fighting things, like, who cares? So I think chapter 3 starts off in a very sort of vapid way where it's not interesting in any way, and it's kind of just boring, which action scenes should probably be the least boring thing you write. Then we get more into the Frank problem, that jarringness, where he's way too cool with all of this. In fact, all of the characters are way too cool with all of this. They're in a remote factory. There's like 5 guys. They don't know what the heck the rest of the world is doing. One of their men has died, and they're like, let's bury him. There's not a thought of let's call the police. Let's do all of these rational things that you would do in a functioning society. It's almost like we've opened the novel in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. Like, not like that, not like the middle, like it's 2 hours. Like we're 3 days into the zombie apocalypse, and we've just accepted that society has gone away. There's that kind of attitude, and I don't know why, especially from the grizzled war veteran who just accepts that this is the reality now, even though it's the most ridiculous thing from his experience. And if it's not clear, I like Frank. He's my favorite part of the novel. And him being in such a weirdly, tonally different story is the best part. But you can do that in a more intentional way as a writer without it feeling jarring. And chapter 3 continues. I think there's some long chapters, by the way. These are the longest chapters of any book we read today. And then you get out the skill. All the characters get their skills, RPG. But where this novel differs and where the hook is supposed to be is that the main character is the specialist boy of all, and he's given all these unique skills, and one of those unique skills assigns him skills randomly, so he can no longer pick skills off the skill tree. He just gets stuff now, and it could be the stuff at the end of the skill tree. It could be stuff that's just completely useless or even hurts him, as we find out. And I actually really like that idea. That's a cool idea, because there's just such an interplay and such a creativity that the writer can bring to it of like, I have like, oh, this magic skill and this whatever skill that have there's no commonality there, but now the character can use these two things in an unexpected way to do something really cool that the audience hadn't thought about. Like that is just a carte blanche to write whatever the heck you want and make it really interesting and creative. But that's, of course, not what happens. What happens is the character gets skill after skill after skill of things that go perfectly well together and that build into a single class perfectly well together. I mean, he's basically a berserker. He can take as much damage. Enemies deal damage, but it's just boring when you start your story off and say, wow, look, we've just started, but my character is the best character. In chapter 4, he gets one of his other unique skills. He gets basically Cortana, not the Halo Cortana. He gets the Microsoft Cortana. And if you're thinking those are the same thing, I would argue there's a big difference. And Cortana is here to exposit dialogue in mass. And there's so much expositing, I would upgrade that to vomiting. It's a lot of exposition, and nothing here is novel. This is a very simple RPG world setup that you see in these kinds of novels, and everything is explained and explained and explained and bleh. And there's not a lot interesting about her character either. In fact, I would not even say she has a character. She's there for exposition. And there's this snowball effect where every time he's the first to unlock a new skill, he gets more skills to reward him. So it's laughable in terms of creating drama and tension in this world. It's just, you're immediately out the window, just dogpiling it here, which is a shame because you could have used that, like I said, to create something that wasn't necessarily overpowered. A lot of literally weak skills and skills that seemed to have nothing to do with each other. You could have dogpiled those on to create something really cool, but it's just a really boring power fantasy at first. As the story continues, the group breaks up. Him and Frank decide to go to town and see what's going on. There's a fight, and there seems to be some danger for Morgan, the main character, which is not well established because he is so ungodly strong. I'm not really sure how in danger he is, even though the narrative and the novel seem to be saying that he's in danger. I didn't quite buy it yet. And then just more OP things happen. He can absorb skills from dead human beings now, which means he has even more skills. I mean, literally, you can't keep track of all the abilities this main character has. To town, and they make it to the city that they've been trying to get to at the start of chapter 7, and it's totally all of a sudden there's a bit of whiplash. It's very dark all of a sudden. Once again, that sort of juxtaposition between ridiculous and that sort of frank gruffness. There's dead children. It's gory. It's brutal. But then there's actually a scene with tension. The main character legitimately almost dies. He gets out of it by unlocking an OP skill and then whatever. But the one thing that really works inside this RPG setting of this novel is there's the stamina, at least in this chapter, where if you run out of that, everything else doesn't matter. You're just screwed. Heavy RPG penalties there. So that's what happens when he's in the fight, but then it doesn't matter. That entire issue goes out the window because he gets a skill that fixes his stamina. And then we're going to slow roll it here into the end. They make it to a private school where there are survivors. Chapter 8. Frank is more likable. No more comment. Chapter 9. Almost nothing happens. Lots of long-winded exposition. Chapter 10 revolves around long-winded explanations about the shopping system, which, you guessed it, the main character can cheat and get around. But there is a really cool detail here that I do like, in that apparently some of the human beings have been greedy and have learned how to set up a secret tax on the system to benefit themselves. And that's a cool detail. And that's kind of the vibe I get as we go through and summarize here, is that it's almost a zombie story. Like we're one step away from a post-apocalyptic zombie story in a lot of the tone and a lot of the elements here, that's the part that works about it. And if you could somehow mesh that together with the RPG stuff, then you'd have a lot more interesting story. I mean, this potentially, with just the elements here and we're going to ignore how they're executed, this could be very good. Especially if you chop the word count in half. I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more if I would have just skipped over exposition paragraphs a lot of the time. I mean, as a reader in a novel, even if it's something you enjoy and then there's just a bunch of boring stuff, you can skip over that. In the context where I'm taking pages and pages of notes, it feels a little cheating to do that. I kind of feel like I need to read everything to my own detriment. I can never spell this one. Our second work we'll be covering is Leonotis. Not Leonidas. It's the African version. And I mean that quite literally in that this is supposed to be Afro-fiction. My goodness. Afro-fiction. Leonotis wakes up with no memories. Orphaned by a tragic past, his mother, a powerful mage, died protecting him while his father vanished into the dark forest, taken by a vengeful dryad spirit his mother once imprisoned. Leonotis survives only because of his mother's final sacrifice, not before he was implanted with the dryad seed, a mystery that left him carrying a burden he doesn't understand. Now the seed spreads, twisting his very nature as a ruthless king seeks to claim his new power for his own designs. The boy who lost everything may yet hold the key to saving or dooming the world. A few sentence errors there, but overall a much better summary, and also really interesting. And African-based fantasy is pretty novel. They exist, and I actually, in my last video, or the video before last, depending on when this comes out, I briefly touched on Afro fantasy and its rising popularity, and the fact that I like that. It's really interesting when you get away from the sort of Western motifs that have been done to death. Not that they can't be done good, or they can't have new novelty, but it's just there's a much lower bar to entry when you're writing in a culture that, at least in the market I exist in, is not well represented. And I will go ahead and jump in and defend right away that I actually think the prose is quite good in this. So the little awkward summary is a little bit jarring. Well, the author has done some of my work for me here because the summary was basically the first chapter. It's basically a Harry Potter start in some ways, where there's this evil entity. The mother's coming home, being in there by a rhino, cool, and oh no, she goes into the basement and the evil entity is killing her husband. Her child's in danger. There's a whole fight, and at the end she has to sacrifice herself to save the child. It's very Harry Potter in that, but where it is perhaps lacking in clarity is the evil demon is just in her basement, and we're just told it escapes. There's no context for why the story has started happening, and I do feel like there kind of needs to be that context. It's hinted at like it's a mystery, but it's weird, and the way the story develops doesn't improve that mystery. Chapter 2 turns this into a multi-threaded high fantasy novel. We then teleport ourselves in the point of view to the capital, where the prince is speaking to a demon in a cage, which is something that we've seen before. And the demon is really kind of evil, kind of not. He's guilty of defiling corpses, which how evil is that really? But he's a demon, and Prince Riga and Nijiru decide to work together and overthrow his father, which is confused because the premise, everything I just said sounds really simple, and you get it. But the father is also evil, and even more evil. So it's morally, we have more questions right away, and the actual trajectory of the story is unclear to the reader. I'm not sure what to expect, because is the prince evil? I mean, he's working with a demon who's kind of evil, but he didn't really do anything that bad. And it's pretty clear that his father is super, super evil. We're kind of jumping ahead to chapter 4 here just to condense these two story threads together here. So, back in Leo's story, he wakes up from his traumatic event and he has amnesia. There's no lightning scar. He just doesn't remember anything. He's sort of in the hospital right across from his house. There's a woman there taking care of him. And to pair with the amnesia, he's really excited about everything. He wants to go play with sticks. He wants to go play with swords. The healer's husband is a sword master, and right away there's a disconnect between what happened and what's happening now, which once again is particularly problematic given the lack of establishment. Every single story thread that we're getting is sort of non-conclusive. I don't know how to feel about any of these starting out. I don't know enough about the mother or the father or the demon in their basement. I don't know what the prince is doing. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. The kid is just having a good time. Then we get my favorite scene of the night, where the healer woman, Chinaka, I'm assuming that's pronounced right, is going to go to another village to send a message to the capital because she's concerned about the demon, and she sees an antelope. And then she's like, "Don't lie to me, antelope. Where did that demon go?" And then the antelope turns into another demon who's, once again, I don't know how evil demons are in this mythos, but he's like, the demon's hurt from that other stronger evil demon we saw in the previous chapter, and he's just capitulating. He's like, "Listen, lady, I need your help. I'm hurt. I am not that bad. Just, here's where he went. Let's be cool." And then the woman kills him. And it's a really nice surprise, too, because you think she's just talking, because she's magical. She's just talking to this antelope. But then the antelope, who's a demon, wants to be honest, I think. I mean, it's always possible it's miscommunicated and she understands it's a demon. But from my point of view, the demon's just like, "Well, I'm not even going to try and like lie to you here. I'm a demon. It's out in the open, so let's be cool." And I really love that scene. So chapter 5 is a winner. Also, she has a motorcycle. After all the other fantastical and sort of antiquated stuff we've seen, which I say antiquated because the prince kills his father with Gatling guns that shoot light, which was confusing. That was the first modern thing we see. But it's not well established. Audience expectation is important. And that's, if there's one thing this is missing, it's that. Chapter 6, nothing happens. Chapter 7. The kid is training with the swordmaster husband, and as far as I can tell, this is pretty soon after his parents died. Like, this is not, especially given like the Harry Potter motif I was talking about, you think, oh, 10 years later, and this thing happens that starts his life. He's just training with them. He's got a wooden sword, and they're going to hunt a fox demon in the woods, which they do. There's a fox demon that, as it turns out, is being enraged by these magic mushrooms that the other evil demon at the very beginning of the novel is sort of poisoning the forest. But it's established that the fox demon is a threat. And yet, this small child with no memories and a stick is allowed to go swing that stick at the dangerous thing that could kill him. If there's one thing that's very frustrating is the main character, and I wouldn't even know it was the main character if he wasn't the title of the story. Chapter 8's a fun little chapter with the newly ascended prince, the new King Riga, on the throne talking to his demon servant, who is now dressed nicely and seems to be an effective administrator. They're cleaning up the evil king's messes. So how evil are they? Chapter 9. Two people come from the capital in a carriage pulled by birds, which Harry Potter in my mind is very Harry Potter, but it's cool. That is a cool fantasy thing, especially in this world where you have some animal stuff, rhinos pulling things. So them coming lines up with the last chapter because they're trying to figure out what's going on in the land. There was this demon attack. They send someone out there to investigate. The woman Shinaka doesn't comply exactly. She tells them what happened, but they're like, come to the capital and tell the king. And once again, this is the tunnel thing. She says no, like perhaps it's dangerous, or like the king is evil now, but we haven't seen that. Is she just, I mean, at least in terms of the verbiage, in terms of what she's saying, she just says, I promised to serve the old king. I haven't promised to serve this new one, which tracks, but I'm concerned with character motivation. So is she concerned that the new guy is evil? Because it proceeds in chapter 10. They have one of those moments of just pack everything, we're leaving, we're in danger because I just said no to the king. Were you in danger because you just disobeyed the king? Were you in danger because him and his demon friend are dangerous? Out of all of the characters in the novel, his demon friend, Nijiru, he's the only person who hasn't killed someone outside the other kid. Until, as we're packing, the kid finds his journal, and apparently when he still had his memories, his family practiced dark magic, and the kid found out that he was vivisecting dogs. The kid himself did. So he was evil, his parents were evil, but also they're not because she was killed. That's all I got. That's all I got narratively. But in terms of summary and themes and just how do you deal with a story like this writing-wise, expectations are so important. You need to have your audience understand something. Not even everything. David Lynch proved that. But just give us the cardinal direction that we're going. There's an evil king that we have to defeat. Done. But you didn't give us an evil king we have to defeat. There was an evil king, and then the new guy killed him, and I don't know, he seems cool to me. Is it a story about Leo dealing with his trauma in some way? No, I mean, maybe in the long term, but once again, I read 10 chapters, dang it, and while they are much shorter chapters than the first story, you need to communicate in 10 chapters what your story's about. Yeah, that's my summary. That's even my review. I really cool concepts all around, but I have no clue narratively what I'm supposed to be enjoying, what I'm supposed to be expecting, and when you're not expecting something, what happens does not modify any expectations. They just, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. Stories should be told, so something happened, or but then something happened. Person A killed the king, so people tried to kill him, right? and just this story is just and then it's completely disassembled from connective tissue. And now we get to the fun part. This is something special, because this is not going to be. You'll see. You'll just see. Let's start with the story. Let's start with the Eye, Part 1. Custodes Animarum, by the scribe of Ain. So very, very lofty. In a world where power is worshipped and the tradition lies buried deep beneath centuries of deception, one squad begins to question the cost of loyalty. I guess you've never seen the laptop. There's a laptop here. Zeta Squad, an elite unit within the Eye, follows orders without hesitation, but their latest mission forces them into the shadows of a system they've long served. Led by the unyielding Hugo Bailis, they find themselves entangled with a fugitive known only as the White Bolt, a man whose past threatens to unravel the carefully curated truths of their world. And if that was the end of the summary, I'd be very happy, but it keeps going on for a bit. And right away, that seems fine until tonally it does the same thing over and over. As ancient scriptures resurface, remnants of forgotten relics reawaken, and whispers of forbidden arts grow louder. A war, some seek progress through control, but beneath every banner, is there a way to... Yeah, so it's repetitive in structure, and there's really not an advancement of ideas outside that initial paragraph, which... Think about that for a second. It's going to be very relevant. I skimmed the prologue, which I just made a whole shtick about reading things thoroughly but it's important to point out that the prologue is not a story. What a prologue should be, if we're going to just start with the perfection, this is the goal. A prologue is a short story within the universe that adds greater context to the events that are about to transpire. A prologue should stand alone from chapter 1. You should be able to read one without the other. And once again, a prologue should be a story. What transpires in this book, the prologue is like a dictionary, encyclopedia. The prologue is an encyclopedia entry about the history of the world, not in like a Lord of the Rings prose kind of way, but just literally just here's what happens in this year, that year. It's couldn't pay attention even if I wanted to. And I think that's important because when you tell a story, you have a structure to hang your facts on. When you're just telling us facts, you might as well just be writing them on a whiteboard and trying to remember them for the test, which is why it's so much easier to remember your favorite story than it is to study for your test, because you're emotionally attached to the narrative, you're emotionally attached to the characters. There's the neurons in your brains, they link up to these facts, and you can now remember them. So there's no point in even rereading this in a thorough manner because I'm going to forget it anyway. So let's get to the story. And if you feel like you know where this is going, where the story is also not going to be a story, you're wrong. That's not the big surprise here. The story starts, and it's very much written like that introductory paragraph that I read for you. It's very evenly metered, very sort of solid. I mean, it's the writing is okay. There's a kill squad sent out to kill the White Bolt. Not a lot of context, really. The White Bolt is a bounty hunter. I don't know what that means. And their youngest member, their weakest member, gets accosted by him. And he tries to like, oh, your organization's evil. You don't even know the secrets. I know the secrets. And that's where we're going to stop talking about the narrative and start talking about how the narrative, not even how the narrative was written, but how the prose was written. Because this, my friends, is AI, which is not good. First off, you're wasting my time, because this is, you might be saying, oh, review this so I can get the views if people like it. But also this is like a section for critique. This is like, how do you make these works better? I have no actionable advice to give the audience on how to write better when you present me with something with AI. Because there's no intention there. There's nothing wrong outside of using the AI. And if you're thinking AI is not wrong to news, let's talk about that. Because section 1 of this new video essay, how do I know it's AI? There's 2 big takeaways. 2. First, generally, is the meter. There's a flow when you write, and AI is very even. It's just da 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 da. You can look at the hyphens, you can look at this or that, but really it just comes down to the feel of the sentences. Especially me, who has critiqued 1,000 works in the last 5 years. Literally, it's probably more than that. Right away, you can tell something's off. There are, and it's not that there's no mistakes and it's written just in a strange prose. There are mistakes, and those mistakes become even stranger. I'm gonna put it up on screen here. So the character describes someone as a snitch, and then she says, "How do you know I looked like this?" The AI is really good at writing a single sentence. It can write grammatically. It can write even emulating an actual prosist. But when you start to compound the topics, when there are multiple ideas, the AI can't regulate that. The AI doesn't know what happened before and how to make things match. So of course, this is a sort of AI mistake where the AI calls you something about your personality and then calls that a description later. Because it's writing in sort of these block ideas where this is the paragraph where I describe her, this is the paragraph where that follows that where I transition out. So these sort of mistakes. And when you have a human writer, because human writers can make the same mistakes, this is how you tell the difference. When a human writer makes these mistakes, they'll also make other mistakes, like filtering, for example. A lot of times a writer will say things beforehand like, oh, I looked to this and this thing happened, which you don't have to write looked because that's just when we're in their point of view, we understand that when something happens, they looked. But this writer will have summary sentences after they happen. So they're filtering, but they're only filtering at the end of it. A human being who has a problem with filtering will always filter. A robot who's trying to transition will accidentally filter at the end, but you don't transition before you do something, so that mistake's not there. It's very apparent. And if, let's just say, this author doubles down and says, I didn't write like AI, brother, you've got a huge problem because it's indistinguishable and it's bad. That's the point. I'm seeing things that are inherently problematic, inherently hard to read, ugly to read, or just wasted space, sharpness, these kinds of things. And it's the way the mistakes are presented in such a one-sided capacity is where I say AI. Because we'll go back to the meter. The meter. You just say, I just sound like that. That's just how I write. The only people who write like that are foreign language people, which, no hate. I speak 2 languages. I'm learning a 3rd. It's really hard. I have never been down on someone for not writing in their native tongue. I'm kind of like impressed, to be honest, because I would never write prose in a different language. It's just, that's insane to me. But the only people who would write in this sort of stilted, metered manner are somebody, especially like Chinese writers will do that because it's very endemic of their language, or it's AI who's just very calculating in the set meter of how they're writing. And how you know it's not Chinese versus one, because there's other mistakes. It's just mistake upon mistake and mistake, and they're very particular, and they're very annoying, and it just, I'm not reading a human's work. It's a complete waste of time. So I did not read past chapter 1. I got this little spiel together to talk about AI. If someday, perhaps, AI might actually be that good and you'll fool me and you'll fool everyone else. And once again, there are mistakes. That's the thing I'm talking about here. In a long-form narrative, AI just simply can't do it. So right now, 0 questions asked, don't use it. But let's talk about just philosophically, don't use it. Don't use it. Like, you're making something artistic. If you're making something outside of people who do it literally just for money. Well, if you're a person just listening, how do I make as much money as possible from writing? You're probably in the wrong place anyway. But outside of that, if you have a song in your heart, if you have a perspective on the world and your writing is supposed to encapsulate that, AI ain't helping you anyway. You're only hurting yourself. I play chess. And the golden rule, everyone understands, especially at the high levels, is that when you finish a game, you don't put it in the computer and analyze it because that'll make your brain into mush. You have to analyze it yourself and then look up the right answers because that's the productive way of growing as a chess player. And to grow as a writer, it's not going to happen with AI. I'm sorry to tell you, but if you are using AI and you think that will somehow lead you to become a better writer, you're wrong. We can rank the I. Yeah, this is the thing I'm doing this. I'm just going to put all the rankings at the end. So then it's a mystery when I pick the winner. The I gets a 0. It's not a real piece of work. Screw you, buddy. Now, I actually had a hard time deciding what I liked more between the Assessment Initiative and Leonotis. Because the Assessment Initiative, while clunky and while frustrating in its overpowered nature, told a very clear narrative with a clear narrative growth, which is, that's why people read it, and I get it. I understand the appeal of these. It's not something I would go out and buy and read in my free time, but I get it, and it's there, and I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. And in Leonotis, you have a story that has a lot of really cool elements, and I don't think I talked about this a lot. I didn't talk about this a lot, but the writer has really good prose. The writer for Leonotis is pretty good at writing, really, just on a sentence-by-sentence basis. So you have these cool ideas, this cool motif, versus not cool ideas, kind of poorly executed motifs, but more competent. So I will now pronounce the winner as the Assessment Initiative. I could not get over my annoyance at the structure and the expectations that were lacking in Leonotis. However much I was rooting for it. I mean, I will confess to being biased here and wrong perhaps, and that I was looking for an excuse to say that Leonotis was better, but it's just not. I don't think it's the biggest gap ever on our Royal Road rating system, where in my personal opinion 2.5 stars is dead center average. That way you can actually discern the difference between, a 1 and a 5 versus the actual Royal Road system where it's 3 to 4.5, much harder to discern. I'm going to give Leonotis a 2. A 2. I mean, I like the 2 part of it. The goods are really good, but there's nothing there to hang any sort of real enjoyment on. It's frustrating. It really is. And it pains me to say that because I really wanted to be in your corner. It wouldn't even take that much correction to put this into a structure that a reader can comprehend. But the winner today, the Assessment Initiative, is still not that high. As you could probably tell, I'm a little frustrated at it in many parts, and I'm going to give that one a 3 out of 5. It is above average. I mean, for all of my complaints, I probably didn't say enough good things about it. The basic structure is there. The basic dopamine reward system is there for this kind of story. And there were parts I liked. I liked Frank. I liked how the author was able to subvert my expectations and create stressful situations when I didn't think they could exist. That makes me hopeful for the future that this could happen again. I keep having this expectation that he's overpowered. There's no way we can keep telling the story with stakes. And yet, maybe there is. Maybe I should trust the author. So, that wraps up today. Woo! You know how long it takes to fully notate 10 chapters? I mean, obviously I'm not reading my... And you might think I'm just reading my notes off here. This is the summary after reading my notes. And there's so many little details because this video is so long already. But you got to cut it down. You got to make it watchable. In theory.